Welcome to Reveal This. For millions of viewers, Richard Thomas will always be John Boy Walton, the gentle voice at the end of the Waltons, whispering goodnight to a nation. He represented innocence, family, and hope during a turbulent era. But behind that comforting image was a life far more complicated than the character the world loved. At 74, Richard Thomas's story reveals a quiet tragedy shaped by pressure, loss, and the heavy burden of growing up too fast in the public eye. Richard Thomas didn't stumble into fame. He was born into it. Raised by parents who were both dancers in New York, the stage became his second home before he was old enough to understand what choice even meant. By the time he was a child, Richard was already acting on Broadway and appearing in television productions. Applause came early, but so did expectations. Everything changed in 1972 when The Waltons premiered. Overnight, Richard became one of the most recognizable faces in America. The show was a massive success, offering comfort during the Vietnam War and social upheaval. To audiences, John Boy felt real. But for Richard, fame was not comforting, it was consuming. While other kids his age were discovering who they were, Richard was trapped inside a role he could never fully escape. He carried the weight of being a moral symbol, a role model, and the emotional center of a hit show, all before adulthood. The pressure was relentless. Every decision he made, every word he spoke, was measured against the expectations of millions. When The Waltons ended, the real struggle began. Hollywood didn't know what to do with Richard Thomas once John Boy grew up. Casting directors couldn't separate the man from the character. He was either too wholesome or too familiar. Roles became harder to find, and the industry quietly moved on. The transition from beloved child star to respected adult actor proved far more painful than anyone expected. Behind the scenes, Richard's personal life began to fracture. His marriage to Alma Gonzalez, with whom he had 4 children, including triplets, slowly unraveled. The pressures of work, distance, and emotional exhaustion took their toll. In 1993, after nearly 2 decades together, the marriage ended in divorce. It was a deeply painful chapter, one that Richard has rarely spoken about publicly. Then came the losses that truly changed him. Richard Thomas endured the deaths of close family members, including his parents, anchors in his life since childhood. Losing them meant losing the last people who remembered him before fame, before expectations, before the role that defined him. Grief settled quietly, but permanently. As the years passed, Richard continued working, on stage, in television, in smaller but meaningful roles. He never stopped acting, but the spotlight was no longer warm. It was distant. And aging in Hollywood brought a new kind of invisibility. The same industry that once depended on his image now barely noticed him. Physically, time has also left its mark. Richard has spoken about slowing down, about feeling the weight of decades spent working without pause. The stamina that once carried him through long shooting days is gone, replaced by careful pacing and reflection. The boy who once carried a show on his shoulders now chooses roles that respect his limits. And yet, perhaps the deepest tragedy is not what Richard Thomas lost, but what he never had. He never had anonymity. He never had a normal youth. He never had the freedom to fail privately. His life unfolded in front of cameras, critics, and expectations he never asked for. While the world remembers John Boy with nostalgia, Richard lived with the consequences of becoming a symbol before becoming a man. Today, at 74, Richard Thomas is no longer chasing fame. He's chasing peace. He values quiet moments, meaningful work, and family connections rebuilt over time. He carries gratitude for the Waltons, but also the scars it left behind.